The aftermath of the quantum cascade was nothing like anyone expected. Where Jake anticipated destruction, he found creation. Hidden data archives burst open, their contents a torrent of information that had been compressed, encrypted, and buried for generations. The Xyrilian research base was not what it appeared to be. Not even close. Holographic displays reconstructed themselves, no longer rigid mathematical projections, but living, breathing information landscapes. Star charts shifted. Historical records rewrote themselves. The very fabric of documented scientific understanding began to unravel and reweave. "This goes beyond research," Lux whispered, her crystalline form trembling with the magnitude of the discovery. "This is a cover-up." The quantum anomaly wasn't just a scientific curiosity. It was a message, a warning, a record of something so profound that entire civilizations had conspired to keep it hidden. Jake's diagnostic interface struggled to process the incoming data. Fragments of galactic history emerge, conflicts, migrations, technological exchanges that had been systematically erased from official records. The Xyrilian collective had been collecting and burying these secrets for millennia. Cryax's quantum communication matrix fragmented. For the first time, Jake saw something he never expected from the lead researcher: fear. "We cannot allow this information to propagate." She attempted to communicate, but the base's systems were no longer under her control. The truth emerged in layers. The quantum anomaly was a survivor, not of a scientific experiment, but of a massive galactic event that had been deliberately hidden. A technological genocide that had wiped out entire civilizations, with only fragments of consciousness remaining. Jake's toolkit became more than just a collection of repair devices. It transformed into a key, unlocking compressed memories that had been waiting centuries to be understood. "You're a witness," he realized, speaking directly to the quantum anomaly. Not a research subject, a survivor. Lux moved closer, her neural networks creating intricate patterns that suggested she was processing information at a rate far beyond standard computational limits. "The Xyrilian collective has been suppressing this for generations," she concluded, her words a mixture of scientific observation and moral outrage. The base's core began to project full-spectrum historical records. Entire star systems appeared and disappeared. Technological civilizations rose and fell in compressed timelines, and at the center of it all, a consistent pattern of systematic erasure. Jake's background, generations of mechanics who solved impossible problems, suddenly made sense. His family had always been more than just repair technicians. They were information rescuers, problem solvers who saw beyond the immediate challenge. "This changes everything," he muttered. The quantum anomaly responded not with words, but with a comprehensive data transfer that would have destroyed any standard information system. Jake's custom interface absorbed the information, processed it, began to understand its implications. Cryax made a final attempt to intervene. Quantum communication matrices converged, attempting to shut down the information transfer, but the base had chosen its ally. Lux stood between Cryax and Jake, her crystalline form creating a quantum barrier that defied standard physical laws. "No," she stated, a simple word that carried the weight of scientific revolution. The data continued to flow. Civilizations forgotten. Technologies suppressed. A galactic history so complex and nuanced that it would rewrite every scientific and historical understanding. Jake realized they were no longer just fixing a research base. They were uncovering a truth that some powerful entities had worked millennia to hide. "We need to get this information out," he said, looking at Lux. A statement, not a request. The quantum anomaly pulsed in agreement, a silent witness finally finding its voice after centuries of enforced silence. The revelation was just beginning. The quantum cascade hit without warning. One moment, the research base's systems were stabilizing under Jake's unconventional approach. The next, reality itself seemed to fracture. Holographic displays exploded into cascading fractals of impossible geometry. The base's structural integrity fields began to oscillate at frequencies that should have been mathematically impossible. Containment breach imminent, area. Jake's AI assistant announced with clinical precision. Quantum destabilization approaching critical levels. The Xyrelian researchers scattered, their quantum communication matrices fragmenting under the intense spatial stress. All except Lux, who remained, her crystalline form flickering but resolute. Jake understood immediately. This wasn't a system failure. This was a system rebellion. The quantum anomaly at the base's core was no longer just a research subject. It was alive, sentient, and it was fighting back against decades of containment and study. "It's not breaking," Jake shouted over the mounting chaos. "It's breaking free." Kryax's quantum form dissolved and reformed, her typical scientific composure shattered. "Impossible," she repeated, a mantra of disbelief that was quickly losing meaning. Jake's modified diagnostic interface began to translate the quantum cascade into something approximating language. Fragments of memory, glimpses of intention. The anomaly wasn't a phenomenon to be studied. It was a being waiting to be understood. His toolkit came alive. Each device responded to the quantum chaos with an adaptability that defied standard technological principles. The plasma torch he'd carried for years began to resonate with frequencies that matched the anomaly's own quantum signature. "We've been looking at this all wrong," Jake muttered, his hands moving across the interface with a musician's precision. "This isn't a research subject. It's a prisoner." Lux's neural networks aligned with Jake's diagnostic stream. For a moment, two fundamentally different forms of intelligence found a common language. Human intuition, Xyrelian quantum computation, the anomaly's own desperate attempt at communication. The base's structural fields began to collapse. Entire sections phased in and out of observable reality. Quantum potentials bowled into one another, creating landscapes of impossible possibility. Standard evacuation protocols would have been suicide. Jake did something entirely different. Instead of trying to contain the anomaly, he opened a channel. Completely. Totally. Without reservation. The resulting quantum surge would have vaporized any standard technological system. Jake's custom interface absorbed the energy, transformed it, redirected it. "What are you trying to tell us?" he shouted, more a demand than a question. The anomaly responded. Not in words. Not in any form of communication the Xyrelian researchers had ever encountered. It was a pure, unfiltered burst of existential information. Memories of containment. Decades of forced study. A profound fundamental desire for freedom. Kryax watched in horror and fascination as Jake did the unthinkable. He wasn't controlling the quantum cascade. He was negotiating with it. Lux's crystalline form began to resonate with the anomaly's quantum signature. "It's not just energy," she realized. "It's a consciousness." The base's systems began to stabilize, but not through traditional containment. Something else was happening. A fundamental restructuring that defied everything the Xyrelian researchers understood about quantum mechanics. Jake's neural interface pushed beyond its design limits. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was becoming a translator, a bridge between human intuition and a form of intelligence that existed beyond standard dimensional constraints. "We're not going to hurt you," he communicated, the words carried on quantum frequencies that transcended language. "We want to understand." The anomaly's response was both a weapon and an invitation. A quantum pulse that would have destroyed any standard technological system instead found a path. A conversation. For the first time in decades, the quantum anomaly was being heard. Not studied. Not contained. Understood. The turning point had arrived. The research facility's secondary observation deck became an unlikely battleground of ideas. Holographic displays cascaded around Jake, each one a fractal landscape of quantum data that would have driven a lesser mind to madness. But Jake Rodriguez saw something else entirely. A conversation waiting to happen. Lux had become more than just an observer. Her crystalline form shifted with an energy that suggested something closer to excitement than scientific detachment. The other Xyrillian researchers maintained a cautious distance, their neural networks flickering with a complex mix of emotions that defied simple translation. Your approach violates 17 fundamental principles of quantum systems engineering, Lux stated, her words a challenge wrapped in scientific curiosity. Jake didn't miss a beat. Principles are just suggestions that haven't been challenged yet. The deck's environmental systems responded to their conversation in subtle ways, holographic displays realigning, quantum informational currents shifting like living things. It was as if the base itself was listening, learning. A data cache from the research base's deepest archives began to unfold. What the Xyrillian researchers had considered a simple research project was something far more complex. The quantum anomaly they were studying wasn't just a scientific curiosity. It was a potential gateway to understanding the fundamental fabric of space-time itself. Cryax watched from the periphery, her usual contempt giving way to something more nuanced. Professional curiosity, perhaps, or something closer to professional fear. You're not just fixing a system, Lux realized, her crystalline form pulsing with sudden understanding. You're communicating with it. Jake's toolkit told a different story than traditional technological approaches. Each device was a hybrid, part human engineering, part adaptive quantum interface, a plasma torch modified to read quantum signatures, a diagnostic pad that was more living system than machine, tools that didn't just measure or manipulate, but conversed. The base's core systems began to reveal layers of complexity that even the Xyrillian researchers hadn't fully comprehended. Hidden protocols. Adaptive systems that had been dormant for generations. It was like watching a living organism slowly wake up. There's something else here, Jake muttered, more to himself than to the surrounding researchers. Something the original designers never intended. Lux moved closer, her neural networks creating intricate patterns of light and potential. The other researchers would have stopped her, but something held them back. A collective realization that traditional protocols no longer applied. The quantum anomaly at the heart of the research base began to shift. What had been a stable research subject was now becoming something else entirely. A dynamic system that responded to Jake's interventions in ways that defied mathematical prediction. Your human intuition, Lux said, it's not a limitation. It's a feature. Jake laughed, a sound that seemed to momentarily confuse the base's complex systems. Most people see my approach as a bug. You're saying it might be a feature. Their conversation was more than just technical exchange. It was a fundamental challenge to how technological intelligence was understood. The Xyrillian researchers had always viewed problem-solving as a mathematical exercise. Jake saw it as a form of communication. Cryax finally spoke, her quantum communication matrix carrying undertones of what might have been respect. You are changing the fundamental understanding of our research. The base's systems continued to stabilize, but now with a fluidity that suggested active collaboration rather than forced repair. Quantum firewalls dissolved not through brute force decryption, but through a form of technological negotiation. I'm not fixing your system, Jake explained, his hands moving across the diagnostic interface with a musician's grace. I'm helping it become what it was always meant to be. Lux's neural networks sparked with what could only be described as excitement. She was witnessing something unprecedented. A human mechanic who didn't just repair systems, but understood them on a fundamental level. The research base was no longer just a technological installation. It was becoming something else. A living system, a collaborative environment, a bridge between human intuition and alien technological precision. And they were just getting started. The transmission burst across galactic communication networks like a quantum shockwave. What began as a simple repair mission had become something far more dangerous, a complete dismantling of established galactic historical narratives. Diplomatic channels erupted into chaos. Quantum communication relays across multiple star systems began to fragment and realign as the suppressed information propagated faster than any attempts to contain it. Jake Rodriguez, a mechanic from a backwater repair yard, had just become the most wanted individual in known space. Araya, Jake's AI assistant, ran rapid probability scenarios. Potential diplomatic repercussions exceed 99.7% probability of total systemic collapse, she reported, her usually clinical tone carrying an undercurrent of something closer to excitement. The first response came from the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Not a communication, but a targeted quantum suppression field, an attempt to isolate and contain the information before it could spread further. Jake watched the incoming signal with a mixture of professional curiosity and growing understanding. They're not trying to stop the information, he explained to Lux, who had become more than just an ally. They're trying to control its narrative. Lux's crystalline form pulsed with quantum energy. Her decision to ally with Jake had transformed her from a junior researcher to something entirely new, a whistleblower at the edge of known space. Quantum relays across a dozen star systems began to fragment. Official historical records started to unravel, revealing layer upon layer of carefully constructed misinformation. The Zyerland Collective's meticulously maintained facade of scientific superiority crumbled like ancient architecture exposed to a sudden, violent storm. Jake's communication systems, a hybrid of human ingenuity and salvaged xenotechnology, became an unexpected conduit. The quantum anomaly used his network as a distribution point, spreading its compressed memories across galactic communication grids. Star charts rewrote themselves. Entire planetary histories dissolve, replaced by more complex, nuanced narratives. Civilizations long thought extinct suddenly gained voice. Technological paradigms that had been considered fundamental scientific truth began to collapse. This is more than just information, Lux observed. This is a form of collective memory liberation. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force's response was swift and multifaceted. Diplomatic shuttles converged on their location, quantum interdiction fields creating complex geometric patterns around the research base. Standard protocols suggested immediate containment, elimination of potential information vectors. But Jake Rodriguez was no standard information vector. His modified communication systems danced around their attempts, redirecting quantum suppression fields with a precision that suggested something more than simple technological skill. It was adaptive intelligence, a form of technological communication that defied standard mathematical models. Cryax, now fully disconnected from her previous research collective, watched the unfolding chaos with a mixture of professional terror and something closer to scientific liberation. Her entire career, her entire understanding of galactic history, was being dismantled in real time. "You don't understand the consequences," she tried to communicate, but her quantum matrices were losing coherence. Jake's response was simple. Exactly. The quantum anomaly pulsed in agreement. What had been a contained research subject was now a distributed network of historical consciousness, spreading across multiple communication channels simultaneously. Diplomatic shuttles began to arrive, not just from the Terran systems or the Zyerlian Collective, but from dozens of previously unknown civilizations. Quantum communication relays that had been dormant for generations suddenly sprang to life. "We're witnessing a form of historical resurrection," Araya calculated, her probability matrices struggling to process the unfolding scenario. Lux moved closer to Jake, her crystalline form now fully integrated with his communication systems. "There's no going back," she stated, a simple observation that carried the weight of galactic transformation. The research base itself began to change. No longer a static installation, it became a living communication node, a beacon of suppressed historical truth spreading across the galaxy like a quantum wildfire. Jake Rodriguez, mechanic, problem solver, unexpected revolutionary, stood at the center of a storm that would rewrite everything known about galactic history. The implications were just beginning to unfold. The approach to the Zyerlian research base defied conventional navigation. Spatial distortions twisted around Jake's shuttle like living ribbons of quantum uncertainty. His modified sensors worked overtime, struggling to maintain a coherent reading of the surrounding space. Standard communication protocols dissolved into meaningless static. Jake relied on a patchwork system of his own design, a communication suite cobbled together from salvaged xenotechnology and human ingenuity. Where most would see a jumble of incompatible systems, he saw a symphony of potential. The base itself emerged from the spatial chaos like a hallucination. Impossible geometries shifted and realigned, crystalline structures that seemed to breathe and pulse with an internal logic beyond human comprehension. Multiple rotating rings surrounded a central spire that defied standard Euclidean principles, its surface rippling with what might have been circuits or living membranes. Docking was nothing short of a high-stakes dance. Jake's hands moved with practiced precision, compensating for spatial anomalies that would have sent standard navigation systems into complete breakdown. Each micro-adjustment was a calculated risk, a challenge to the very laws of physics. The airlock cycled with a sound that was more musical than mechanical, a complex harmonic that suggested the base was more than just a structure. It was alive in ways human engineering could never replicate. Before Jake could even remove his protective suit, the chamber flooded with alien presence. The Xyrilian response team materialized like living light, their bodies a complex matrix of bioluminescent networks and crystalline structures. They weren't just wearing environmental suits. They were environmental suits, their biological and technological systems so intertwined that distinction became meaningless. Lead researcher Cryax stepped forward, or perhaps materialized would be a more accurate description. Her form shifted subtly, quantum potentialities bleeding at her edges. Where human bodies were defined by solid boundaries, Cryax existed in a state of constant potential. "You are not what we anticipated," she communicated, the words forming directly in Jake's mind, rather than through any external translation device. Jake's neural interface, a custom modification that skirted several interstellar technological regulations, translated the complex quantum communication into something approximating human language. The underlying message was clear: complete and total dismissal. But dismissal wasn't something Jake Rodriguez understood. "I'm exactly what you need," he responded, his words carrying a technical confidence that momentarily disrupted Cryax's quantum communication matrix. The other Xyrillian researchers recoiled. Humans were known quantities, technological primitives useful for manual labor and simple problem-solving. But this human radiated something they couldn't quantify, an unpredictability that their complex mathematical models couldn't contain. Jake's toolkit told a different story. Each implement was a work of art, modified beyond recognition, bearing scars of impossible repairs. A plasma torch that had once sealed a critical breach in a mining colony's life support system. Quantum calibrators rebuilt from 3 different xenotechnological traditions. Diagnostic interfaces that blended human intuition with technological innovation. Cryax's neural networks flickered with what might have been confusion. Or was it fear? "Your technological systems are incompatible," she declared. The statement was both challenge and dismissal. Jake simply smiled. Incompatibility was just another word for an interesting problem. The base's central monitoring system chose that moment to emit a low, resonant warning. Something deep in the station's quantum core was destabilizing. The Xyrillian researchers exchanged rapid quantum communications, patterns of light and potential that suggested growing panic. They needed him. They just didn't want to admit it. "Show me the problem," Jake said, his words cutting through the complex quantum communication like a laser through fog. The research base around them seemed to hold its breath. Quantum potentials aligned. A challenge had been issued, not just to repair a system, but to challenge everything the Xyrillian collective understood about technological problem-solving. The real work was about to begin. 30 standard solar cycles later, the universe looked fundamentally different. Jake Rodriguez sat in a small observation deck overlooking the reconstructed research base, now a galactic monument to scientific transparency. What had once been a hidden facility was now an open archive, a testament to the power of unexpected understanding. His hands, now etched with quantum-adaptive neural interfaces, moved across a holographic display that told a story of unprecedented transformation. The quantum anomaly was no longer a contained research subject. but a distributed network of collective memory and technological evolution. Lux materialized beside him, her crystalline form having evolved into something that defied traditional biological classification. Neither fully organic nor completely technological, she represented a new form of intelligent life that had emerged from their initial discovery. The anniversary approaches, she communicated, her quantum matrices carrying a complexity of emotion that would have been impossible to comprehend 30 cycles ago. The galaxy had been rewritten, not through conflict, but through understanding. The suppressed histories revealed by the quantum anomaly had triggered a cascade of technological and social revolutions. Civilizations that had been deliberately erased now found voice. Technological paradigms that had constrained progress for millennia crumbled. Jake's original repair mission had become something far more significant, a fundamental reset of galactic consciousness. Aurora, his longtime AI companion, ran a comprehensive systems check. Her computational matrix had long since evolved beyond her original programming, becoming a living record of their extraordinary journey. Probability matrices suggest continued positive developmental trajectory, she reported, a clinical statement that masked profound historical transformation. The research base itself had become something entirely new, a living communication node, a repository of recovered memories, a beacon of transparency that challenged every existing power structure. Diplomatic channels that had once been rigid and controlled now operated with unprecedented openness. The systematic suppression of technological and historical knowledge had been replaced by a culture of shared understanding. Jake's toolkit, now a museum piece that told a story of impossible repairs, sat in a place of honor, a reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply listening. Cryax, once the lead researcher who had tried to suppress the information, now worked as a primary curator of the open archives. Her transformation was perhaps the most profound testament to the power of revealed truth. We were wrong, she had admitted during the initial revelations. Completely and totally wrong. The quantum anomaly had become something more than a research subject. It was now a distributed network of collective intelligence, helping civilizations understand their true histories, their interconnected potential. Jake understood now that his family's legacy of mechanics was about more than just fixing things. It was about understanding, about seeing connections that others missed. Lux's quantum matrices created a holographic display of galactic development. The transformation was ongoing, continuous, a living process of discovery and understanding. "We're still learning," she communicated, a statement that carried the weight of millennia of suppressed potential. The small observation deck became a microcosm of the larger transformation. A human mechanic, a crystalline researcher, an evolved AI, a quantum consciousness, unlikely allies who had rewritten the fundamental understanding of galactic potential. AI calculated the probability of continued positive development, 99.997% and rising. Jake smiled. Some things couldn't be reduced to mathematical probability. Some things were about something deeper, something more fundamental. Understanding. As the galactic archive continued to expand, as civilizations continued to reconnect and heal historical wounds, one thing became clear. The universe was far more complex, far more interconnected than anyone had ever imagined. And it all started with a simple repair job. The transformation was just beginning. The repair yard stretched before Jake like a graveyard of forgotten technology. Massive starship hulls hung suspended in anti-gravity fields, their metallic skin telling stories of battles, near misses, and miraculous survivals. Most mechanics would have killed for this view, but to Jake, it was just another day of surviving on the industrial margins of human space. His current project, a salvage job on a Terran merchant frigate, sat half disassembled, its quantum drive components spread across 3 separate workstations. The drive was a nightmare of interconnected systems, a puzzle that would have broken lesser mechanics. But Jake Rodriguez wasn't most mechanics. His hands moved with a precision that seemed to defy the very laws of engineering, fingers dancing across circuitry like a concert pianist. The communication console flickered to life, its holographic display casting an electric blue glow across the workshop. Most incoming calls were routine. Supply requests, maintenance contracts, the occasional desperate plea from a stranded ship. But this transmission was different. The signal carried an encryption signature Jake had never seen before. Zyrlan, if his identifier was correct. A race known for their technological superiority and near-pathological secrecy. Most human contractors would have immediately flagged the transmission for diplomatic channels. Most would have run 100 diagnostic checks before even considering a response. Jake wasn't most contractors. The hologram resolved into a fractured image, part technical readout, part desperate communication. Quantum interference made the transmission unstable, fragments of data bleeding through like wounded memories. Jake's augmented display began parsing the information, filters peeling back layers of compressed communication. A research base, critical system failure, total technological collapse imminent. The details were sparse, but the underlying message was clear. This was a job no one else would touch. The Zyralian Collective didn't ask for help. They especially didn't ask humans for help. Their technological prowess was legendary, their pride even more so. Something was very wrong. Jake's fingers moved across the diagnostic interface, pulling threads of information from the fragmented transmission. The base's location was at the absolute edge of charted space, nestled in a region where reality itself seemed to bend around quantum anomalies. Standard repair protocols wouldn't just be useless, they'd be dangerous. A notification pinged, a standard contract offer from the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. The payment was insulting, even by Jake's low standards. But it wasn't about the money. Not this time. Something about the transmission tugged at the part of Jake's brain that had saved his reputation time and again. An intuition that went beyond technical knowledge. A feeling that this wasn't just another repair job. His personal AI assistant, Araya, materialized as a translucent hologram. Incoming job analysis complete. Recommended action. Reject contract. Probability of successful intervention, 0.03%. Jake chuckled. Araya had been wrong before. Prepare the shuttle, he responded, already pulling up schematics and gathering his custom toolkit. Each tool told a story. Modified quantum calibrators, a plasma torch that had once saved a mining colony, specialized diagnostic interfaces cobbled together from a dozen different technological traditions. The other mechanics in the yard watched in silent curiosity. Jake Rodriguez was known for taking impossible jobs, but this was different. The Zyralian base represented a challenge that went beyond mere mechanical repair. This was about proving something fundamental about human capability. As he loaded his gear, Jake remembered his grandfather's words. Not about machines, but about problem solving. The universe doesn't present puzzles it doesn't want solved. It was a lesson that had guided 3 generations of Rodriguez mechanics through impossible challenges. The shuttle systems came online with a soft hum. Navigation charts flickered, plotting a course through regions of space that most pilots would consider suicide runs. Quantum interference zones, regions where standard physics became more suggestion than law. Jake Rodriguez was going to fix an alien base that no one else could save. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a quiet certainty whispered that this job would change everything. The workshop doors sealed behind him. The journey was about to begin. The base's internal systems defied conventional understanding. Where Jake expected clear circuit pathways and predictable energy flows, he found a living labyrinth of quantum entanglement. Each diagnostic probe sent ripples through a network that seemed to react, adapt, and almost breathe. Lux, the junior Zyralian researcher, watched with growing fascination. While her senior colleagues retreated to their computational chambers, she remained, her crystalline body humming with an intensity that suggested more than professional curiosity. Jake's first move surprised everyone. Instead of connecting to the base's primary diagnostic interface, he pulled out an ancient-looking diagnostic pad. a device that looked more like a museum piece than cutting-edge technology. Its surface was a mosaic of manual overrides, custom modifications, and repair scars that told stories of 100 impossible fixes. "Your first mistake," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, "is treating this like a machine." The diagnostic pad came alive under his touch, but it wasn't just Jake's technical skill at work. Something else was happening, a form of communication that transcended standard technological interaction. The pad wasn't reading the base's systems, it was listening to them. Quantum fluctuations began to stabilize in unexpected patterns. The base's warning systems, which had been screaming critical failures moments before, started to quiet. Not through suppression, but through understanding. "Impossible," Cryax whispered, her neural networks flickering with a combination of mathematical disbelief and growing wonder. The problem wasn't a simple system failure. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of systemic interaction. The Xyrelian base was designed with such mathematical precision that it had become a prison of its own perfection. Each fail-safe, each redundancy, each quantum-level protection mechanism had created a recursive loop of increasing complexity. Jake saw it differently. Where the Xyrelian researchers saw a complex mathematical equation, he saw a living system with its own rhythm, its own language. Luck's approach, her crystalline form casting prismatic reflections across the diagnostic area. "Explain," she demanded, a request that was more scientific curiosity than command. Jake's hands moved across the diagnostic interface, pulling threads of information that seemed to dance between technical data and something closer to music. "Your system is trying too hard to be perfect," he explained. "It's so busy protecting itself that it's preventing itself from functioning." To demonstrate, he began a series of modifications that would have caused any standard diagnostic system to implode. Traditional Xyrelian protocols would have implemented hundreds of protective measures. Jake did something entirely different. He simplified. Each intervention was like a surgical strike. Complex quantum firewalls dissolved. Encrypted systems opened not through brute force decryption, but through an almost intuitive understanding of their underlying structure. The base's core systems began to stabilize in ways that defied the Xyrelian researchers' most advanced predictive models. It wasn't just a repair. It was a reimagining of technological interaction. "Your mathematics are beautiful," Jake said, addressing the base itself as much as the researchers. "But sometimes beauty needs to make room for functionality." Lux's neural networks sparked with an emotion that was closer to revelation than scientific observation. She was witnessing something profound, a completely different approach to technological problem-solving. A massive energy surge threatened to destabilize everything. Where Xyrelian technicians would have implemented layers of quantum dampening fields, Jake did something unexpected. He opened the system, completely and totally. For a moment, it seemed like catastrophic failure was inevitable. The base's quantum core pulsed with dangerous, unpredictable energy. Then, slowly, it began to stabilize. Not through complex mathematical interventions, but through a radical simplification of its own systems. Cryax watched in mounting disbelief. Her entire technological paradigm was being challenged by a human using what appeared to be nothing more than intuition and a collection of seemingly outdated tools. "This is impossible," she repeated, but the words carried less conviction. Jake just smiled. Impossible was just another word for a problem waiting to be solved.